section is about lightning talks. So we'll be going through around 11 of those. I hope so everyone is over here. Yeah, all right. Can everyone get settled behind? And everyone who is having a tea with them or a coffee? If you're towards the end, can you let the people who are outside let them know as well, like we are starting? All right, so we'll be having 3.5 minutes of lightning talks by 11 of the participants over here, and at 3, just some rules. After 3, I'll give a 3.5. I'll be giving a warning, and at 4, it's like you need to stop because we are out of time. So the first talk we have is by Bilal, and he'll be speaking about conferences around the world on your fingertips.
Oh, silence. Okay. Cool, thanks.
Yeah, can we have a round of applause?
Okay, I'm more nervous now. Okay, so actually, I'm a big fan of conferences, and I keep a track of conferences around the world, and I usually pick up conferences and watch talks around them. What I realize is it's pretty hard to keep a track of all the conferences around the world. And what more importantly, what favorite speaker of mine speaking of at what conference is a pretty daunting task. So I decided to take a challenge and compile a list of conferences. But I felt like it has to be more intuitive, and I can interact with the stuff, with the data. So I made some solution. I hope you all like it. So I built this app called Conflist. It is on conflist.io. And what sorry. So, okay. So this is all upcoming conferences. I hope you can see it. If I zoom in more, then it is not readable enough. But you see here all the list of tech conferences around the world coming, all the upcoming conferences. Then on the right hand side, you can see there are a list of all the conferences happened this year. If you can see here, these are the conferences there are a lot of conferences. Then inside, you can see that what is the data, right, where the conference is and all, what is the Twitter handle, what all speakers will be there. And this is just a basic prototype I was doing, and I hope to add more data. But right now it's just out of my curiosity as a side project. So if you are interested in getting your hands on this prototype, I would just say that drop your email and I'll share you the app. Be brutal with the feedback, and I would appreciate you guys. Thank you.
We have Shishir, who will be speaking about your app is hit, now avoid common mistakes that slow your app. Next, after that, we have Shweta, so I hope she's prepared.
Oh no, it's... Yep. Okay, hey guys, so this is just a common list of things I go over when I'm reviewing performance tests of an app and stuff, and making sure that everything is in place. So let's just take a hypothetical situation that will walk us through the list. Let's say I have built a food delivery app, and then everything works. Customers love it, and there's a lot of orders, and then it's really getting traction. So I really didn't pay attention to performance and stuff when I was just building the MVP. But now that I'm seeing traction, I face some problems. So what I'll say is, before we can start tuning the performance tests, we need to make sure that we have all the testing pyramid lined up correctly, because if things start breaking when you start tuning performance, then it's just an unending rabbit hole. So what I'll say is, one of the immediate problems you might face is horizontal scaling, which is a pretty easy problem to solve. There are a couple of things that you can do with Rails app, which is like serve static assets with Nginx and do SSL termination on the load balances. That helps with your performance a bit. So yeah, let's say you're getting suddenly a lot of orders on your app, and then creating orders and dispatching orders and stuff like that takes a lot of time. This is pretty straightforward 101 stuff. You can add indexes, you can use query analyzers, stuff like that to make sure that everything is performant on your databases. Next problem that you might face is something like loading a menu, which takes a lot of time. This is also pretty straightforward. You can use cache to store your menu. There's also an inbuilt cache inside Active Record, just pointing that out. And you can also go through the Rails caching guide, it's quite comprehensive. Okay, so let's say you got everything lined up, everything works till now, but now there's a real influx in orders, and then you find that your app is bottlenecking on IO wait. Straightforward solution again, you could use database pools and connection pools for Redis and stuff like that. There's no need to build connection pools by yourself. You can use this very handy connection pool middleware that's there in Active Record. Yeah, now let's say you come this far and now customer places order, but the requests are timing out. So then you use queues for offloading stuff to workers. Say if you have this sort of logic where you need to send an SMS to customers whenever an order is confirmed, what we need to do is we need to offload it to something like Sidekick or some other popular background job. There's one thing that I would call out over here is I see these sort of patterns quite regularly. This is not really resilient. What actually needs to be done is you view process request one and then offload request two also to a worker, so that adds resilience. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rishir. All right, so next up we have Monish, who will be speaking about experiences and problem solving.
Hello, everyone. This is mostly an experience that I had, and I just want to share something with respect to problem solving. A few months back, we at Bangalore Ruby had a meetup where we were basically trying to solve an exorcism exercise through pair programming. So at this Ruby meetup, the way we went about organizing it was people were grouped in pairs, comprising of a senior and a junior. We did not let people know what would be the problem that they would be solving until it was at the day of the meetup. So we decided to solve a Roman numerals kata, one of the exercises. The format of the meetup was like we would have 2 sessions of problem solving, basically, and there would be 2 30-minute breaks, one in between of the 2 sessions and one towards the end. We also wanted to have some kind of feedback during these breaks. So we try to follow a format similar to what we have at Code Retreats. So we were asking all the participants who were grouped in pairs questions like, how do you think it's going so far? What do you think you could do better maybe in the second half of the problem solving session? What are you going to do different in your approach with that? And how are you going to go about solving it that way? Towards the end of the second session, one of the groups who actually completed the exercise, totally there were only 2 groups which completed solving the Roman numerals kata by the end of 1.5 hours. One of the groups that actually completed the kata, they mentioned that they were able to solve 11 out of 19 tests from the exorcism exercise by the first half itself. This got me very curious to ask them what was their approach, what exactly did they do to finish so many tests within the first half. So that's where problem solving attitude or approach comes into picture over here. So I just asked them to share something more on that. So one of them said that what they did was they were excited to solve the problem from the very beginning. 2 people, one of them with hardly any experience in Ruby, and the other one with around 6 months of experience in Ruby, tried to solve this problem, and they were able to solve 11 tests in the first session. That was something that really surprised me, and I really found that to be interesting. So basically what they did was they were excited and they used TD religiously and they solved one test at a time and they identified patterns along the way. So yeah, this is one thing that really helps people when they do problem solving, and this is one of the recommended ways of exorcism also. This was something that was really exciting to me because I didn't think about these things always when I solve problems, and I try to apply it at work. And this is where I got a chance to apply it for one of the sales. I work for a company called Sephora, and I had the opportunity to apply this for one of the sales that we had at our company, and we had few performance bottlenecks that we had to address. And I had limited knowledge about the code base, and the domain knowledge also was limited for me. But learning from the meetup and how somebody with lesser experience went about solving it, I just took it up as a challenge, and I applied that attitude to solving problems, and it eventually really helped me to get things done. So yeah, this is basically how the one of the performance related stuff I was trying to solve in terms of the carts checkout page, which is a very critical part of the application. So yeah, I was able to make reducing the amount of time it takes for the carts page to load and get some performance improvements along those lines. So basically what I wanted to talk about here is don't let experience come in your way when you're trying to solve a problem. We think that is always maybe something that can stop you. That need not always be the case, because if you solve with the right attitude, you're always going to be in a better position to solve things. So yeah, thank you.
So we are coming back to the laptop restart. We have Shweta again, who will be speaking about worker processes. The network issue is solved as well, right? Okay.
Hi, I'm Shweta. I'm here to talk about worker processes. Not Sidekick worker processes, but about Nginx worker processes. Few days back, our client reported that our APIs are too slow and they are taking about few minutes to respond. But when we tested these APIs, they were quite efficient and was responding in few milliseconds. Then what changed recently? As number of users increased, number of concurrent requests to server also increased. Initially, only hundreds of concurrent requests were coming to our server. Now they were 3 to 4K. And we have not architected our server to handle this much load. When this problem arrived, I thought, let's break down problem in steps. First, I checked RDS instance. It was using only 20% of CPU. I revisited all the queries. They were optimized enough. So database was not bottleneck. Then I sent unauthorized request to server to check with less Ruby processing how much time request takes. And it took around 20 seconds to respond. 20 seconds for unauthorized request? No, not at all acceptable. So there, I thought, let's check out Nginx configuration. There is something which I might have missing. And initially, I observed that I was using 5 worker processes. And worker process directive is responsible for letting our virtual server know how many workers to spawn. And I was using 1024 worker connection. Worker connection sets the maximum number of simultaneous connections that can be opened by a worker process. According to MAS, I was using 5 worker process and 1024 worker connection by each process. So 5,000 requests can be served, but this was not happening. Why? Because I was using single core processor. It is common practice to run 1 worker process per core. Anything above this won't hurt your system, but it will leave idle process usually just lying about. And this is what exactly was happening with my Nginx configuration. We decided to increase our hardware capacity and opted for quad core processor. and redirected our request to that server. This helped us a lot. Our API performance increased, but not to the great extent. We were not happy with that performance because we had increased our hardware 4 times and still our API was slow. So after reading few blogs, we realized that our passenger settings were not optimized enough. We were using process-based passenger with only 6 pools. Passenger max pool size defines uh, the maximum number of application processes that may simultaneously exist. A larger number may hit your memory usage, but improves the ability to handle a concurrent HTTP request. When I checked our CPU usage, it was about 20 to 50%. So we were not utilizing powerful server we had. Our total RAM was 15 GB and RAM per process was 400 KB. So according to this formula, we can set passenger max pool size to 30, but we set it to 15 because we wanted to keep room for other processes as well. For calculating max pool memory, we run passenger status at different interval of time and recorded that stats. Almost many of us work in a team and we know key skill of each team member and try to use that to deliver the best product. Similarly, here web server, app server, hardware works in a team. We always write a good code, but if we know such things, that can help us to deliver the best product. I hope my experience will help you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Veda. Next up, we have Docker First Impressions by Anusha. After that, we'll be having Gaurav.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anusha Bhatt and I work at Joe Software. So, the first time I heard the term Docker, the image that came to my mind was something like this. Well, technically speaking, Docker does some of the things like that, like loading and unloading of dependencies and other stuff. Well, we had a workshop in our office regarding Docker, and I was totally awed by it because being a fresher, I didn't know many of the stuff. But after attending that workshop, I was actually awed by it. So, our company has a legacy of working and implementing new things. So, following the same, I tried to Dockerize my project, and today I'm here to share some of the few mistakes that I've done and what I learned from them. So, the first and the stupidest thing I've done up till now is using Ubuntu as the base image, and on it I've tried to install Ruby, Rails, and other gems. Well, actually speaking, I failed at installation of Ruby itself. So what I was trying to treat Docker as a virtual machine, which is incorrect. So then I shifted to using Ruby as a base image, and it worked. I mean, the Rails got installed, gems were installed, the server was running at port 3000, and my user on the browser, the user login screen was displayed at least. So I think that was pretty cool, like it was working. But here I'm missing something. So can anyone guess what I was missing? Well, it was database. How can a project ever run without a database? So that's where I came to know about services, and I included a service for database as well as a service for Rails server, and linked them using Docker Compose and other things. Well, now at least I have a database, a server running, and my project was working locally fine. Well, so I was happy, like my mission is accomplished. My project is running locally. But there's again something I'm missing. Well, that day I exited the container, and when I reran it, my data was lost. Almost nothing was there. So I thought, what is the use of Docker if my data is not getting persisted? Why should I use it? That's where I came to know about, well, we can mount the data of the database. So in SQLite, all the data is stored in a file. So similarly in MongoDB as well, there must be somewhere where the data is actually getting stored. And I got that location from a conf file, and I hosted it. I mounted it on my host machine. And after that, my data persisted. Wow. my project actually got Dockerized on my local machine without much hassle, without much difficulties. I was very happy, like at least I got to learn something and try to implement it. Well, according to me, learning is a continuous process and it should never end. So after that, I tried to add Nginx as a web server. And before that, I came to know about web server, the difference between web server and application server, how a web server actually works, what are the configurations that you have to make. And after getting to know that, adding Nginx was not a difficult job. Well, there are still many yet things to be added to it, like GitHub integration, CI, CD, and other stuff. But maybe another time, and someone else might be covering here. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Anusha. We now have Gaurav, who will be speaking about wrapping the NASA Spice library. So Gaurav currently is doing GSOC as well with SciRuby, if you have heard of it. We had a speaker last year speak about SciRuby as well.
Yeah, hi. So I'm a final year engineering student, and I'm going to talk briefly about my project for the summer for Google Summer of Code. So basically, NASA has a library called SPICE, which they commissioned in 1982 because they decided that all the data they were getting from space missions was sort of going to waste, and they wanted to perform useful calculations on it. So back then, the first software they deployed was in Fortran. So I'm sure most of you guys don't really like Fortran now, but you might agree that it's one of the best softwares for scientific computations. So they stuck with it. And eventually, they created a new API for it in C using an auto generator. Now, the problem here is that there's really no improvement in API, and you might know that Fortran has 5 character limitations on its function names. So basically, something like Ferns became Ferns_C. So that didn't really help the readability of the API. So how is SPICE still useful today? Well, missions that are still ongoing and recently completed still have their data archived. The toolkit's still managed. It has a new port to MATLAB, but not a high-level language like Python or Ruby yet. There are many third-party wrappers in Python, but not really a good one in Ruby yet. And in general, you'd agree that someone who isn't a hardcore programmer wouldn't be interested in, the idiosyncrasies of a language. Like, you wouldn't want to deal with memory allocation if what you just want is the output of the high-level software. Like a space researcher, for example. So just to give you an example, this is a question on Stack Exchange. So the highlight in yellow shows the question, and the reply came after that, and the reply was really long, and at the end you got, alternatively, you could just use SPICE and its libraries. So it basically reproduces a lot of functionality that a lot of space researchers would want, but the thing is, it's very hectic to use the C library the way it's shipped. So I decided to make a wrapper and name it SpiceRub. I'm not sure if you guys will find that funny. So it's got 3 layers basically. There's a CXSR for the third-party library, and that gets called by a Ruby function. So you can see here that Ferns_C is replicated as Ferns for anybody who's familiar with the API. And then we have a more intuitive API that says load. And Ferns basically represents the acronym Furnish. So you can see how Fortran has really constrained the intuitiveness of the API back when the language was actually made. And this is how bad the API can get. Like, I'm not sure if this is because space research is complicated, but this is about 15 parameters for a single function. So this is a kind of, and the function name intuitively makes no sense at all. So you can imagine how you would have to get a better API for this. So some quick SPICE terminology. They call their archive data kernels. This sort of clashes with a lot of CS terminology, I imagine, like software kernels and Ruby's internal core file. But this is what NASA likes to call it. And another thing is ephemeris. An ephemeris is a body in space which is being observed for any computational purpose. It can be anything like a planet, a satellite, a star, or even an instrument attached to a spacecraft. And you can see that after checking all this out, SPICE is a really vast library with a lot of functionality, feature-rich, but a very dull API, in my opinion. So I'll just give you some examples of the abstractions I've done. So I've added some objects like body, time, and kernel pool. And these things, as you can see, if you instantiate body, you get a bunch of parameters which you would have to explicitly call through C functions if you were using the original CSpice library. And also, I've used NMatrix, which is SciRuby's core matrix library, as a storage container for vectors. So some of the routines provided by Spice became sort of irrelevant, and we were able to directly do them with optimized vectorized code like that. So what you see down there, the snippet, is basically something like this. You square all the coordinates, add them, and square root them to get you the distance. Now, just a random example. This morning, I used the Spice library to estimate the distance from the Earth and the Moon. And apparently it's about 395,000 kilometers, and Google says it's about 384,400 kilometers. That's a bit fine, I guess, but you know, it's not exactly a circular orbit, so the distance is not going to be the same throughout the year. And yeah, another thing is the other statement, Earth.position at. You can see that that would be if you were standing on the sun, if that's possible. Then these are the coordinates you'd see if you measured the thing. And yeah, that's basically it. Thank you.
Thanks, Gaurav. This is your GSOC project, I assume.
I am Prasoon Anand. I am a student of chemical engineering from BITS Goa, and I am doing my GSOC project on port and matrix to JRuby. Basically, this project will help us to port other Ruby gems that are built by SciRuby to JRuby. So this is all about JRuby, right? Speed and optimization. So NMatrix is a SciRuby's numerical matrix core implemented for dense and sparse matrices, and it uses Fortran libraries like Atlas, CBLAS, LAPACK for computation. What makes NMatrix means it's just like NumPy, means you can store n-dimensional matrices and you can perform computations on it, and the syntax is very easy. NMatrix for JRuby has been implemented currently using Apache Commons Math, and we may be changing it to JBLAS, which is a Java wrapper for Atlas library. So this is how you create an NMatrix using NMatrix gem. Y is equal to nmatrix.new, then specify the shape. For example, here the matrix is of shape 2 into 3. And these are the elements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And its D type is float, and you store it as a dense matrix. When you pretty print it, you get a matrix of this format. It's a row major format. Coming to the optimization and speed, there was a lot of instances when I was porting NMatrix to JRuby, and I was like, what the hell is going wrong? And I was like to shoot myself in the foot, right? So two main things you would like to care about is memory management and chaining Java methods. Let's see, if we are going to benchmark this piece of code, okay. For example, you have to iterate through a large matrix of size 15,000 into 15,000, that means around 225 million elements. It will take you around 43.26 seconds, and it consumes around 5.4 GB of RAM. And which when compared to MRI, MRI takes it around 2 seconds, and RAM consumed is around 300 MB. So what was going wrong? We'll discuss about it. So in that case, when you can't do anything with JRuby, even if you use threads. So by threads, you can take down this time 43.26 seconds to 6 seconds. And this happened on my 8-core processor. So bringing it to 2 seconds, it will take me around 58 cores. So that is literally not possible. So what I did was I changed it to Java methods. Java methods, when I implemented this same code in Java, it took me around 0.023 seconds. That was around 1,000 times increase in the speed. And moreover, what was going on wrong with that, whenever you create a data type, JRuby interpreter tries to find the dynamic data type on invocation. So what happens is that you totally upset the garbage collector. And as a result, the speed, whenever the GC kicks in, it forgets about the original data containers, and it takes a lot of time. So Java methods were used for large arrays, converting 2D matrix from flat array, and for proper cohesion. And the next statement you see is from my mentor, Charles Nutter, Hedius. And he says that why it's JRuby performs so badly when compared to MRI for storing large arrays. So memory management was solved by using less copies, and type guessing was done through Java. And there is some case of auto boxing. Whenever you store data, sometimes what JRuby does is that it gives you all the elements as 0. Means this problem occurs sometime and it cannot be recreated. And this is how let's go to the final benchmarks reports. This is about the matrix multiplication. So you see that JRuby, it loses currently, but now as we are switching to JBlast, it will be at the same pace as Ruby Lapack. And that's how this Roadrunner is not performing well. Now for matrix addition, JRuby is outstanding. You can see that the time taken is the least. So it's going to be around 100 times faster than Ruby MRI. And that's how, beep beep. That's all. For knowing more about this project, how you can optimize your software in JRuby, you can see my blog, prasoonanand.com, and follow me on Twitter, Prasoonanand. Thank you.
Thanks, Prasoon.
The topic of my presentation is mystery of real time. So let's see an example of real time. In this example, I'm taking a count of the current count of users which are active at a given point of time. In this, I mean when one first client connect to the server, and then the second client is going to connect. So how does this happen? Before that, we'll see a table. So initially, the count is 0. Then the count increases to 1 as the first client gets connected. Then count increases to 2. How does this happen? So the browser sends a request to the server. That server responds to the browser, and the JS is loaded. The JavaScript, in turn, sends one more request to the server itself, and a subscription is initiated. By that I mean the WebSockets Connect channel has been initiated. Then the subscription which has been done on that WebSocket channel, it returns a channel, and inside the Ruby ecosystem, and then that returns to the browser itself. So can we think of something like in the Ruby ecosystem which does this already? So there is one option, that is, we can have a count which is responding onto the server, onto the browser itself. And this is, like as the slide I'm showing, this is the first count we get, and when we repeat this process for the second client connection, the second counter is increased. So we already have a gem in our Ruby ecosystem which does this, and that is Action Cable. What does it provide? It provides seamless integration of WebSockets to our existing Rails application. So server, connection object, and channel comprise of an Action Cable. What does it do? So server creates a connection object that has got many channels, and these channels in turn broadcast to the browser. So then, can we use, so as we are having, so we all, as Rails developers, we develop Rails application. We can include this Action Cable in our application. But what about if we have a JS application which is residing on another port, like we have NPM, we have done NPM start, and we want to just make use of the simple Action Cable, not the entire Rails framework. Can we do this? Yes. Why am I saying that? Yes, we can do, because Action Cable has got the gem dependency of only Action Pack, NIO4R, and WebSockets gem. That's it needs for getting Action Cable to work with. So we can actually make use of Action Cable, and we can also write Sinatra apps, which will connect to a front-end application like React.js or AngularJS. Thank you. So today we have learned how we can connect our Action Cable. Today we have learned how Action Cable works. Thanks.
So I hope you all had good impression of Docker from Anusha. Okay. So here and now, whenever and wherever you go in any conference, you'll always get any talk or lightning talk on Docker, because world is moving towards microservices and containers. So we are at Ruby conference, and let's talk about deploying Rails on Docker. Okay, who am I? A FOSS enthusiastic, currently enjoying my work at Big Binary. So how about if I tell, I'll be deploying my Rails app to production within a minute, okay? So obviously, as a developer, you are gonna say, how is it that possible? There is a process, like it goes to some CI, CD and all, blah, blah, blah. But how the Docker has evolved as like deploying within a seconds or a minute to production. So obviously, a thought comes in a mind of developer like, how will it go? How will my one small commit from my local will go to production by any way? But as an DevOps or as an infrastructure guy, I'm the one who has to take care of it, okay? So thinking, one can think in many, in it like we can introduce like continuous integration, continuous development with many other tools, but Docker makes it really easy. So that's the problem, how we are gonna ship, that is solved by Docker. So again, the most important thing is portability. Developers use either Mac, Windows, or some other user-friendly operating system, while servers are always running a next kind of operating system. So Docker is there for you. You install Docker for Mac or Docker for Windows and develop your application over there and just ship that app to the production, and that's it. The portability is achieved. So, okay, enough. So let's get going and let's try to have a live demo. So, okay, I'm over here. This is my Rails app. This is a sample and normal Rails app. What I have is one file called Docker file. Okay, over here there is a simple code. Obviously, I assume developers always enjoy a code. So there is some syntax called from Ruby. So whenever I change this from Ruby to Ruby 2.3.0, my code will be deployed on the production using Ruby 2.3.0. So this is all syntax stuff. Then what this Docker file does is it builds an image for my app. Then there is something called docker compose.yml file for me. So what it does, whenever the containers are running, how they can be linked together and how app serves on production, okay? So Docker Compose is an automation or orchestration tool for Docker. So I'll just try to give a brief of this. So services means what are all the containers and images. So DB, right here I'm using Postgres image. So as in like there is always an image needed to run any container, and there is a web container where our app resides. So it is gonna build the image from the Docker file with the command running my Rails app. And the ports, Anusha just mentioned that she had to take care of volumes and ports, but this Docker Compose makes the automation for it and makes it easy. And it depends on DB container. So the only simple command I'll take, one command I'll run to deploy my app, that is Docker Compose app up. That's it. When I fire this command, my app is gonna start. So it says like starting test DB1, which has started database app, database container, then test web1, which is my app container running my Rails app. And these are all logs. When I go to my browser, I can see my app over here. This is the sample Rails app. This is my server's IP, and this is the port we exposed in Docker Compose. So over and all, this is a simple app demo. So that's it. Isn't it easy? It's so easy that one can obviously just read it and do the Docker stuffs. So one more thing comes into our mind is like, whenever we use Docker in staging or production, are there gonna some performance issues? There are some like companies like Shopify, Uber, and etc. are using Docker in production. But nowadays, there are technologies evolving just specific to Docker, like Rancher, Kubernetes for orchestration, ECS, and all. So overall, my own experience with Docker is not at all a bad option. Okay, that's it, guys. Thank you. Thanks, Rahul. We have 2 more lightning talks to go after.
Hello, my name is Shweta Sadate and I work for Nilkinda Software Craft. I would like to share my views how to multiply your time, so how it is related to coding practices also. So previously, time management was one-dimensional. It was basically on how efficiently you can do your task. So it is related to develop tools and technology to complete your to-do list faster, but it has limitations. So time management become two-dimensional matrix. So it is urgency versus importance. So it gives us to calculate score so that we can prioritize our tasks depending on these scores. But prioritizing also does not increase your time. So time is restricted. So nowadays we use 3D matrix. So another new dimension added is how significant we can do calculations so that we can increase our time. So how it is related to coding is like you can use coding practices, agile frameworks. So there are things like how you can eliminate unnecessary code. So using agile and using TDD, you are restricted to write code which is related to that test only. So you will not have unnecessary code. It will have a code, and using RGB, you will also refactor your code. So it will eliminate unnecessary things. And also you can automate your code. Automation is like ROTI, like return on time invested, which is like compound interest on your money. At the start it will take time, but after some time it will give you more time. Like using GNU Make, you can build processes. Also using scripting, you can automate process so that it will help in your future work. And delegate is like you can use your some tools to do your task, like Jira, which helps you to give reports, and Jira is like related to agile process management. So, also there are simple things like which editor you are using, like RubyMine, or there are many things which gives you auto save, auto compilation and auto refresh kind of things, so that you will have you don't have to save your code and you will get your result. So I just wanted to say that using these practices, you can increase your time and you can do your product efficiently and on the time. Yeah, thank you. And last not the least, if somebody try to avoid using Pokemon, don't get addicted, so it will save your time. Thank you.
So next up we have Siddesh. That's our last lightning talk for the day. He'll be speaking about treat yourself with code.
This is the last talk and I'll make it quite quick. So myself Siddesh Nikude, and I work for Nilkinda Software Craft. So today, apart from lunch, we are also here to improve ourselves, right? Improving in our skills, improving our knowledge. So improvement is not a one-time activity. You have to put in a lot of efforts. So there are some events out there which you can attend. I would be telling about one such event. Actually, Monish already mentioned in his talk about Code Retreat. So how many of you already know about Code Retreat? Okay. So basically, this is the official definition, you can say. Code Retreat is a day-long intensive practice event focusing on fundamentals of software development and design. I'll directly give you an example, and the definition is quite big. You can read the rest of the definition on the official website of the Code Retreat. So let's have an example. Suppose these are the 4 developers that would be developing. Okay. Now, what we want is, we'll start with giving them a problem statement. Most of the time, the problem statement that is given is game of life. You can again use Wikipedia to know what a game of life is. And we would ask them to develop a solution in a restricted time frame of 45 minutes. Obviously, we would be asking them to pair. So suppose now this guy, Jon Snow, pairs up with Mr. Bean and Voldemort pairs up with Rambo. And after that, what we expect is next 45 minutes, they should do following things: pair program, use TDD, write clean and readable code, avoid duplication, have small methods and classes, and mutually agree on a language, because it could be that the developers are from different background and use different languages. So obviously, don't try to mess with this guy, Lord Voldemort, or you will end up like this. So after this, you have to delete your code, and you'll have a small retrospective. So this retrospective is meant to discuss the approach that you have taken for developing the solution. And deleting the code is because you have to start again. And now we have to switch the pairs. So you'll start with a new person. And this process or this session continues. You have 5 or 6 such sessions. Every session would have a challenge. So suppose there are challenges like no if conditions, no loops, no variable assignments, etc. The focus is not on getting things done, but mastering it. So we do repeat it. Repetition is the key, and we have to master the way we do it. It's not about the end result. It's about the process. So yeah, why coded it again? Doing things that you can't do at workplace. Explore, pair with different people, try different languages, and definitely learn good programming practices. It's free, it's hosted free, plus you get snacks, lunch, internet, and fun. So this 22nd October, it would be celebrated as Global Day of Code Retreat. Around 2,000 plus developers from 150 to 200 cities would be joining. And make sure you also be there, participate, and be a part of the Global Day Code Retreat. Okay, you can get in touch with me if you need the details. That's it, thank you.
All right. A special round of applause for all our lightning speakers.